This lecture we are going to learn about hooks. So let us see what is hooks. Hooks was added in React 16.8. It allows us to use state and other React features without writing a class. Hooks are JavaScript function, but we need to remember two rules while implementing hooks. First, it should be used at the top level of React function, that is, at the beginning of the functional component, and not inside loops, conditions, or nested function. Second, it should be called only from React functional component. Most commonly used hooks are UseState and UseEffect. Other less commonly used hooks are useContext, useReducer, useCallback, useMemo, useRef, and useLayoutEffect. We are going to learn about them in depth one by one later in this module. We can even create our own custom hooks. But we need to remember two rules while creating our custom hooks. At the end of this module, we are going to create our own custom hooks. Now let us learn about UseState Hook. It is used to manage the state in functional component. So whenever the value of the state changes, UI gets re-rendered. It is basically the alternative of this .state which is used in class-based component. UseState returns a pair of value, one that contains the current state and another is the function to update the state. Now let us see the syntax to use UseState Hook. In the UseState function, we need to pass the initial state. So here initial state is 0. Hence, this initial state will be returned along with the function to update the state. So in the left hand side, we are destructuring that value that we got returned from UseState. So count will store the initial value that is 0 and setCount will store the function to update the state. Let us implement UseState Hook in functional component. To do so, we need to import UseState from React. So we have to write UseState like this, and after that in this component we are going to create one button, and by clicking on that button we are going to increment the value by 1. So let's create one button. Let's name it as click, and we are going to show an initial value as 0. So let's create one p tag, and here let's give 0. We can see one value 0 and one button. Now we have to write the logic to update this value once we click on the button. So let's go back to the code, and here we have to declare the use state just after the starting of this component. So we'll declare one use state variable like this. We'll write const and the name of that variable, it can be anything. We are giving the name count, and the second will be a function that will update the value of count. So let us give the name set count. And after that we have to call UseState, and in that we need to pass the initial value. We are giving the initial value as 0. So what will happen? This count will get initialized with 0. Now let us show the value of this count in the p tag. For that we need to write a curly braces. Inside that we need to write count. Now let us save this, go back to the browser. We are getting the same result. Now we need to write the logic to update the value once we click on that button. So we'll write our logic in onClick. So here in the curly braces we'll return a promise. So to return a promise we can simply give an opening and closing braces, after that an arrow function, and then we'll call set count. So set count, and in that we'll pass the initial value plus 1. Now what it will do, when we'll click on this button, this function will be executed and it will update the current value by 1. So let us save this and go back to the browser, refresh this, and now let us click on this button. So once we click on this button, the value is getting incremented. So our logic is working. Now we have to keep in mind that we have to return a promise. We cannot directly return the function. It will fall into an infinite loop. So if we'll save this, we'll see that we are getting an error. If we refresh the browser, we can see there is too many re-rendered. That means it has gone into an infinite loop. So come back to this code, and here we have to keep in mind that we have to return a promise like this. Now let us save this, go back to the browser. We are getting exactly the same output. Hence, we have successfully implemented the first hook, that is the use state. We can create multiple of use state, and each use state will be independent of each other.